everyone, welcome, and thank you for joining me at the Be the Change Summit for today. For those who haven't not introduced myself yet, my name is Sue Lavasani. I am the chair of Women in Esports. I'm also the account manager over at Tundra Esports. Before we begin, I would like to give a big thank you to Alice and Billy over at British Esports for organizing this event, and British Esports itself for their lovely staff and the facilities to organizing this. The goal here is to raise awareness, promote education, and encourage discussion to empower and promote a more equitable, diverse, and inclusive esports industry. The topics that we were speaking on today will just not be relevant for the esports industry. It will also be from other areas and other industries also. It is important to know that the problems and the challenges that we face, or at least the subjects such as equity, diversity, and inclusivity, branch out across other people's areas and lives and what they deal with day to day in their job, their professional careers, their education, their degree. These are all relevant and then the things that we deal with, and it's important that we talk about them, but it's also important that we connect and that we create this relatability to one another. I believe that relatability has a lot in common with inclusion. When we face certain hardships or when we feel a certain way, it can get very overwhelming. We face a challenge, it can get to a point where we might feel lonely. So the true nature to feel very lonely in that problem and to combat that is to make sure that we share our stories, that we all connect together. And this is all coming from an anecdotal point of view, of course. It could be different for everyone. But with that being said, I would like to start with my keynote, if that would be okay. Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So let's start with the keynote. So just a quick intro from me, from my background. I was born in the Netherlands, and I've been living in London for 7 years now. Growing up, I was more or less obsessed with playing video games, mostly because they had a sense of feedback that did not really connect, that didn't really meet the same accomplishment that I was meeting during my life at school. It was a common thing for me to engage with my brother's friends when they were playing GoldenEye and Tekken, for example. And it was a rare occasion that he would let me play and not tell my mom from a sibling point of view. So thank you to my brother for doing that sometimes. But I was also often in internet cafes after that. I was playing a lot of real-time strategy games such as StarCraft and Red Alert 2. And I was often the only girl at the cafe. And most of the time, being the only girl there, a lot of the time I just simply didn't understand, or at least what the remark was related to. I didn't understand why that was a big deal, for example. And it went quickly from not understanding to what the big deal was, like when for example, I beat them, for example. It came from not understanding what the big deal was to simply not caring. And there was a particular moment of joy in breaking that stereotype of, girls playing video games, that when I became the victor in the position that I was in, it was so unique, such a unique feeling, and it was only unique to me because I was the only one there and there was no one else that had that same feeling. It was just me. And I noticed that I created this insane sense of drive that I wanted to be better on all the time. So, and that was just something that always stood out to me. Of course, over the course of the years, like I play video games on and off, and fast forward to working on my degree in 2010, I studied IT, network, and communications. So I did computer technology. I chose this simply because I knew I was going to be around other people that I could talk about video games with, to be completely honest. So, and I was correct, by the way. So naturally, I was one of the only two girls in my class. As you may be aware, tech roles are not as popular amongst women, or at least at the time as well, with huge push at the moment with women in STEM. So, apologies. So, and also there was mentioned when I was getting interviewed for the degree, for at least the university I was staying at, I was getting interviewed, and they mentioned, like, you are going to be the minority here in a very big class. So, but nonetheless, I pursued, and I was, of course, met with, comments here and there. One of the main key examples is like when I didn't understand something, it was always this one reason. And it was never the case of face value of like you didn't understand just due to your knowledge. It was always the one thing. It was the reason that I couldn't change. It was because, I was a girl. I simply, the education space, and because I was a girl, at least for the course I was in, the technology, computer technology course, it was not a space for me. It was just merely a visitor. And it was very common for people like me to drop out and lose interest. And admittedly, this degree was not my passion. It was only there for as a means to an end, admittedly, right? But the stigma, however, of the women in tech and how they're treated in the space, that still had a negative effect on my performance. Um, and having that negative effect on your performance, that could lead to potential discouragement. Whether it's the performance of your job, your degree, or competitive game you're playing, there are additional pressures that can creep up on you like that. And this is interesting because it can create, or at least invoke, a fear of to fuel stigmas. Um, the one I was facing at the time with my degree was that women don't understand tech, and or at least don't really belong in spaces for such as computer technology. But I kept on going and finishing my degree because it was not just a means, as I said before, it was a means to an end. Of course, I needed that degree, I needed that paper, but it was also really important for me to at least be interested to break the stereotype. And that put me all the way back to when I was playing video games amongst guys and stuff, because there was the opportunity for me to break that circle again. And I remember how amazing it felt. So it was just like breaking that stereotype in competitive gaming. It was the exact same circle that affected my performance in my degree, that would lead to discouragement to continue, and then create a potential fear of reaffirming a prejudice or a stigma at least. But that, what I find interesting, and what I want to touch on with stereotypes and breaking them, is that it's not just the stereotypes that we see, and it's not just the stigmas that we face. It is that knock-on effect, almost as a ripple effect, that has a potential of discouraging people either from their passion, their job, their degree, their friend group, everything. And I use the competitive gaming part and my degree part because competitive gaming, or at least video games in general, is something I'm very passionate about. And I've noticed that there's a stereotype there. And my degree, that was just for me to just finish. It was not something I was passionate about, but that still had a knock-on effect on me. That still influenced some of the key moments when I was in the class and I felt very excluded. I felt like an outsider. I felt a visitor. I was not there to finish. They mainly, probably the expectation was for me to quit, because that's tech, or at least computer technology, had a high percentage of people dropping in the first year, and I'm sure that this is the same for other areas in STEM as well. Anecdotally, like computer engineering, there's a lot of people that drop off after the first year. But it's not just that you drop off when you're also a woman, and that fuel that extra, fear of prejudice, and fueling that at least. And stereotypes, at least, are created from a certain bias, right? They don't come from thin air. And due to the esports industry solely being online, these biases, or at least these things, can move at the speed of light. At the moment, how fast we're going and how quickly we're progressing with some things has been so fast. And I don't think, when we look at esports in general, where it was and where we are now, it's just incredible, right? So that's just one of the big examples of how quick things can go. And I mean, I always say, we're at the end of 2023 already. And so that's always something that I'm very aware of. But in esports, at least, there are still challenges that women face that has the potential of discouragement. So it can be from where women don't feel comfortable to communicate via voice chat, which is something that's really important because when you're playing competitively, it is required to communicate through voice chat. Or even just the ongoing discussion that women-based tournaments are needed and why these are needed as an opportunity to provide or create talent. But the important topic remains, for me at least, that in order to tackle the discouragement that comes from negative performance is to create a sense of belonging in this space. And in 2020, this is just a quick data recap, but in 2020, according to one of the France's esports studies, 30% who played ranked games are women, but on the other hand, only 6% of that participate in tournaments. So there is at least some data to back up the claim. This could be a broad claim to take, but it could be looked into further. Why is there a lack of women participating in tournaments if there are a high number of women playing ranked games, for example? Is it the potential fear of not performing well into fueling a fear of prejudice and creating that fear of prejudice? It could be a number of things, but at least we have that data point to at least look into and maybe potentially to seek beyond that. And not having a sense of belonging obviously can make you feel alone. It can fuel the sense of fear of not just failing, but affirming a prejudice on why you have failed. And everyone has their own why, obviously. That's pretty much on the topic of imposter syndrome. That's pretty much where it stems from. There's a sense of why that you can't really figure it out, but it's there, and it's totally fine to accept it and look at it and then find out why that is. But I think everyone has their own why at the end of the day. Everyone has their own fear of, everyone has their fear of potential discouragement. Everyone has their fear of reaffirming a certain prejudice that they don't want to. And from this fear alone, to have talent, to have either talent within competitive areas or professional areas, that can only be created by overcoming that fear. It is a big part in why key athletes and role models to this day, they are the way they are, right? Because at some point of time, they have faced discouragement and in their journey to becoming whoever they want to be. And I am willing to bet that most of that time, there was someone there to ensure them that they belong where they are. They are exactly where they need to be. And sometimes that's something we need to tell ourselves as well. We are exactly where we need to be. Where you are in life with your career, with your your competitive aspect, with what you want to achieve, you are exactly where you need to be if that's the case, because you always have the chance, at least the chance to change that if you don't want to, or if you do want to. There's always a choice. So with that being said, the opportunities generally for women in esports, at least, or the opportunities that exist for everyone is notably growing. Growing support, there's a growing support to build tournaments more and more for women. And it actively seems to, affect the participation numbers as well, slowly but surely, which is a step in the right direction, because all we really need is we really need time. That's the most thing that we need at the moment. We need the time to look at things and to give them the chance to grow and develop on their own. And what needs to remain to be important is the necessity of representation, and this is done by sharing stories, whether it be from successful players or career-driven individuals. And events like these are why it's important to have. It's to share these stories, is to amplify the fact that it is necessary for to have a sense of representation in the space, and it could inspire someone else to look at it and be like, that's a person that is in that space and she looks exactly where she belongs. I had the same at the time with with casters such as Pansy, for example, or Smix, who was hosting StarCraft events. I had the exact same experience where I saw them at live events and I saw them online, and they looked so comfortable in their space, and they looked exactly where they belong. And that only inspired me to continue, not just, at the moment I work in the esports space. I'm an account manager for Tundra Esports, and I might not be on stage like the people that I aspire to, that I look up to, but it doesn't matter, because there's still a sense of belonging that I aspire to, um, that I looked at, and it felt very natural. It felt very organic, and yeah, it allowed me to remind myself that, and push continuously and push it further. So as I mentioned before, anecdotally, we are headed in the right direction, and all we need is just more time and more events like these. But what we can do in the meantime, is to push the education side, with moments like these, and encourage discussion, encourage conversations, the sharing the stories that we have, and hopefully, inspire positive action in the esports industry. At the moment, there seems to be so many stories being shared around, and a lot of people being able to have the choice and the chance to say what they want. And it is important that remains a big topic, that it remains within a conversational space. At the moment, for all things being in esports industry, at least, a lot of it happening online. And it is important that we have moments where we can just kind of get together at a face-to-face and connect. Because as I mentioned before, at the very start, I find that inclusivity has a big link to relatability. And when we go through things, we tend to feel alone really quickly. We tend to think that we are also the person, the only person at least struggling with these things. But it comes so clear, and I feel like social media has only, I mean, admittedly, has helped to that effect, that we are pretty much almost, we all have their own habits, we all have our own, ideas sometimes. There are moments where I find relatable things in the content that I view. And that is only a reminder that, it is important that we connect on that basis, and we connect on that level. So with that being said, this was my keynote for breaking stereotypes within the women in esports industry, at least. I hope that you had great joy in listening to me talking about this. It's something that I find very passionate, and I find it just generally very interesting to reflect on. As I mentioned before, the competitive aspect of my life was never really something that I had problems with. It was just very clear that I knew that there was a lack of women in the space, but it's only been amplified due to my journey in my degree. Really, that was the biggest effect of it. Weirdly enough, it wasn't the sports; it was just my general day to day that allowed me to look at being like, this is quite discouraging, and I hope this doesn't have any negative effects. It did at the end. I mean, I finished my degree, of course, but it's always going to be that feeling. And I know that other women, or at least a lot of women, or women in STEM and women in tech, face the exact same issues. And it can be varied across multiple industries, even music industries, other industries as well. Just general, the sense of belonging is something that we all need to kind of appreciate as well. And then we need to advocate for that too. We need to make sure that other people have a sense of belonging in the space that we share, whether it be with your friend group, your class, your work, everywhere. So with that, yeah, as I said before, all done here. Thank you very much. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy watching the rest of the summit.